Big Dumb Movie is a comedic podcast that often contains obscene language and outlandish commentary. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello everyone! It's me, your host, Corey, here to do a short post-debate follow-up episode. I am, of course, referring to the very fun and somewhat intense debate my friends Steve and Pappy had on the 1982 film Blade Runner. And I'm sure you all remember, but the premise of that episode was, is Blade Runner boring? So who won the debate? That's the question I posed to you, the audience, and some of you have provided answers, which I will now play, starting with the review dude Josh.
What's up, everybody? It's Josh, aka the review dude, aka that guy that tends to ruin podcasts with poor audio quality. And let me just start by saying just how entertaining this debate was between two highly intelligent, sexy individuals who refused to return my phone calls. Jokes aside, I'm sorry, but I really felt like this was a no contest victory for Steve. Personally, I felt Pappy's arguments weren't as focused and tended to be all over the place, whereas I knew exactly what Steve was arguing and where he stood at all times. And I don't think it should be controversial to state that Blade Runner's a popular film. It's like someone saying Coca-Cola is a very popular soda, and then somebody else asking for evidence. Like, you don't have to prove Coke is popular when the evidence is pretty overwhelming and just all over the place. So, Blade Runner is popular, and to suggest otherwise is pretty ludicrous. And if it's popular, then clearly not everyone finds it boring. Pappy argues boring doesn't necessarily mean bad, so I guess he's suggesting slower-paced films are boring, I think? As if there's a scientific formula that must be followed, otherwise the audience will lose interest. And seemingly bases his measuring stick of boredom on the quote-unquote average modern movie audience. Now, I doubt a modern audience would be engaged by something like The Shining or 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I wouldn't label those films as boring based on the average audience's preferences on modern cinema. Like, if Pappy had argued that Blade Runner was overrated, I think the debate would have been more even. However, the subject is if it's boring. And to that, I gotta go with Steve. But I love you both. Keep up the sexy. Mwah!
I appreciate so much that you used your review dude voice for that. My fucking god, I love it. Thank you, Josh. Next up is Stevie from Spoilers Podcast.
Big Dumb Movie, what is up? It is Stevie from Spoilers, and I just want to say awesome job by you, Corey, Pappy, and Steve. That was an awesome episode to listen to. The back and forth, the heated exchanges, really, really fun listen. If I were to pick a winner in this debate, I would probably pick Pappy. Just because from the points he pointed out, what he was saying was specific examples of what made Blade Runner boring, whether it be kind of the sleepy soundtrack or the scenes that always arrived early and left late, to the dialogue. There was just encompassing parts you could say, yes, this is a boring movie. And that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. It just means it's not a very exciting movie, and at times it can really challenge its viewers' patience. So that's why I would side with Pappy. Steve, it's nothing personal. I think you did an awesome job. But between the rain, the very boring dialogue, the non-breakneck pace this movie runs with, even though it's called Blade Runner, it's more of a walker. So I would say I side with Pappy in that it is a boring movie. Doesn't mean it's bad. Awesome job by all you guys. Great job, Corey. What an awesome idea this was. And hope we do more debates like this. Good job, guys.
Thank you, Stevie. I don't know how Pappy didn't make the Blade Walker joke. That would have been a mic drop moment in the debate. Thank you very much. Next up is Josh from the Spoilers podcast.
Hello there.
General Kenobi.
This is Josh from Goshen. That is Josh from Spoilers podcast. I gotta say, the real winner of this debate is Corey. You got two grown men to passionately battle each other in the proverbial podcast gladiator pit, all for our amusement. That's a W. For real, though, as far as the debate goes, I loved Steve's defense of the movie's non-boring nature, specifically when he talked about the character development he found fascinating. However, I wish he would have gone slightly deeper into Deckard's arc and really lay out specifically what he liked about it. As for Pappy, I really liked how he pointed out that good does not equal not boring. I also thought it was a clever argument pointing out how Denis Villeneuve improved on the original Blade Runner's constant drab backdrop. But for Pappy, who consistently pointed out that a boring movie, quote, tests an audience patience, I feel like he could have given us specific time lengths of some of the scenes or even timed out some single shots for us. Maybe he could have even compared those lengths to other movies that even Steve would agree were boring. Before I say who I thought won, I will say that not many podcasts inspire me to listen to them twice. I mean, we're real people out here with jobs, kids, responsibilities, errands, and sometimes all you really need to escape, well, all you really want to escape is two dudes arguing the finer points of a 40-year-old sci-fi flick. So I guess even though I think some of Pappy's arguments are sometimes based a little too much against Steve's arguments instead of presenting his own, I'm still going to give him a slight edge on this one. I think he just barely had a few more good arguments to his point than Steve did. It was really hard for me to make that decision. I complained to Corey a lot about that on the side. But anyway, I give this whole pod, Big Dumb Movie, and this debate, Steve, Pappy, Corey, a huge spoilers yes. And I cannot wait to hear the next great movie debate on BDM.
Thank you, Josh. I also agree that I am the true winner in this situation. Here's what Josh had to say to me on the side, by the way. I'm pulling it up. If I don't vote for Pappy, he'll be mad at me. Is that true, or did I make it up? Who's to say? I'm kidding. All right, next up is our friend Money Mikey. Now that was really something. All right, next we have Big Dumb Movie regular and a great friend of mine, Jonathan. Take it away.
Is Blade Runner boring? This is Jonathan, Big Dumb Movie regular. Anybody that listens to my nonsense on this podcast knows I'm a simple man of minimal words. And after listening to this debate for an hour and a half, the only thing I could think of is this. The best defense is a good offense. Okay, if you don't understand, Corey, it's a sports thing. Except when George Washington said it in the 1700s. And with that said, and in my opinion, Steve takes the W in this debate. In all honesty, whether something is boring or not is 100% a unique and individual experience. The debate is totally worthless if you really think about it. Nevertheless, Steve and Pappy, love you both. Great job. Talk to you guys soon. O'Doyle rules.
Of course, Jonathan had to slip in a joke about me in there, but thank you very much, sir. Now we have Brett from Spoilers podcast.
This is Brett, and I'd like to preface this by saying that I've seen Blade Runner once. I watched it a couple years ago, and I remember liking it quite a bit, but I also find dialogue more exciting than the normal film viewer, I'm sure. That being said, I think you both started out strong. You had good opening statements and laid out a pretty good foundations for your arguments. Unfortunately for Steve, I think the beginning of the end for him was at about 15-minute mark when he gave his definition of what constitutes a boring movie. Saying that a boring movie doesn't engage you in any meaningful way isn't so bad it's good, and saying that a movie has to have quality to keep you interested. I might be willing to give you the first part of your definition, but I take issue with the rest of it. There are plenty of bad movies that I love, that I find exciting, that aren't boring for me. saying that a movie has to be quality for it not to be boring. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Then you use Jim Carrey, of all people, as an example of someone who makes boring movies. That makes no sense to me either. Comes off as snobbish, to be honest with you. After you gave your definition, I remember jotting a note down about how I disagreed with your definition. Luckily, Pappy picked up on this too, and in my opinion, dunked on you right after that. He points out that you are conflating bad, good with boring, not boring, and I agree with him. It's a false equivalency. It's a flawed definition of what boring means. I stopped listening not long after this because, in my opinion, if your definition of boring is flawed, I'd listen to the rest of your arguments and think of them as flawed too. Whether they were or not, I'll never know. Because of that, my vote is for Pappy.
All right, Brett. Strong opinions for a man who didn't finish the episode. Now, jokes aside, I do appreciate you taking the time to send something in, and you bring up some great points. That was awesome. Thank you, man. All right, so that's 2 for Steve and 3 for Pappy so far. This is the last voice recording I got on this topic, and it's from the knowledgeable and well-spoken Film Dylan of the Cinestudy podcast. This is the last one. Take it away, Dylan.
Hey everybody, this is Dylan from Cinestudy Podcast, here to weigh in on who I think won the great Blade Runner debate. Is Blade Runner boring? First of all, shout-outs to both Pappy and Steve. They put together some very compelling arguments. It was passionate, it was fiery, I loved it. And to Corey for putting together a great episode and moderating the whole thing. I'm somewhere between the two standpoints, so that kind of helped. I feel like I don't really have any bias either way, and regardless, I'd be setting that aside for this decision. Let's kind of go through some specifics, and I'll save my ultimate vote for the end. Both debaters here clearly did their research. They had a lot of evidence to back up their points, whether it be evidence regarding general critical consensus or fan consensus, or just scenes that they wanted to dissect from the movie, what their definitions of inherently boring versus not boring are. I feel like everybody came to the table ready to debate. I felt like there was no point where the other debater was just at a complete loss for words or didn't really know where to go next. Both had a plan and they seemed to stick to it. I'll be honest, I do wish that some better examples of other movies that were boring and not boring would be brought to the table. For instance, I feel like Pappy could have found some that were more stylistically similar to Blade Runner. You could even look within the Ridley Scott well, which was Alien, and you can look at the slow burn of that and the plot and the characters and how maybe that outweighs some of the stuff going on in Blade Runner, rather than jumping to what I feel is a completely different brand of sci-fi with things like The Matrix. And along similar lines, I feel like Steve needed a couple more specific choices as far as movies to bring up that were boring, rather than just kind of broad stroke directors like Michael Bay, I believe, was the chief example used. Pappy, I do appreciate that you really shot for some specific moments in the film and said, hey, look at this one microcosm of the entire movie. Here's what it does wrong, and you can see that thread running in other scenes, but look specifically here, and you'll see a big point of concern. I think the general debate about what kind of populations and samples can be used to determine if a movie is boring, kind of weighing the Academy versus Rotten Tomatoes audience score versus Letterboxd. All of that was interesting because that kind of brings up a lot of points on the review world in general and like what does any of this authority really even mean? You guys clearly took different standpoints on that, on what those meant to you within the debate. And that made for some very good dynamics and kind of a debate within a debate. But overall, I think the most compelling thing to debate is the kind of balancing act between good and not boring versus bad and boring, and the other combinations of those four ideas. Like, can something be good but boring? Can something be bad but not boring? There's a lot to distinguish within those two things. You gotta kind of draw some boundaries, see what movies fall into each of those four quadrants, which overlap into one or two others. I think that's the main question about Blade Runner and several other movies in the movie world, but Blade Runner, obviously what we're dealing with here. And with that, I feel like I have to make my debate decision on who won based on who could best kind of draw those lines, give some examples of how something can be good and boring or bad and not boring, and really align that with the rest of their points throughout the debate. And within that, I think Pappy articulated his points the best by using kind of different perspectives and having the most concise definitions between each of those main adjectives, I guess. So for that, I got to give this debate to Pappy. This is not to discredit Steve at all. Steve crushed this debate as well. This was a very worthy competition here between the two of them. I enjoyed listening to it a lot. Hoping for some more Steve-Pappy debates in the future because I was very invested in this one. But yes, ultimately my judgment is Pappy, the winner of the Is Blade Runner boring debate with the best points for the yes, Blade Runner is boring side of things. All right, Corey, thanks for letting me chime in here. Enjoyed the podcast. See ya.
Maybe I should have this guy on for a debate, right? Thank you, Dylan. That was wonderful. Appreciate it a lot. So that leaves us with 2 votes for Steve, 4 votes for Pappy, making Pappy the undisputed winner of the Blade Runner debate. Pappy, well done. You are the debate champion. I'm also going to read off some of the comments we got on YouTube. This is kind of just for fun. I'm sorry your votes don't count in the grand scheme of this debate follow-up episode, but your opinions do matter. The first one was from We Are Boa, who says, Steve had some good points, but Pappy's opening statement had me at hello. Sounds very romantic. Gina Settle says, great pod, love the debate. I've never seen Blade Runner, but I will have to watch it now. Pappy's opening statement was fantastic, and for me set the tone of what I expected to hear in the debate. I loved both arguments, but I leaned toward Pappy's side until the closing statements, and then Steve stole the show. His closing was pretty much perfect. I gotta say, I absolutely love this episode and will listen again after I watch Blade Runner. That's awesome. Thank you so much. David Strecker says, being a Ridley Scott movie, I can imagine this takes place in the Alien universe. It's the same types of characters in a much more expansive space. It's a cinema movie, but not something I would show to somebody who isn't willing to be a little bored with the cinematic achievement that it is. Pappy won me over on the debate. Steve made some solid points that I agree wholeheartedly on, but I've only made it through once without falling asleep. It is boring, but it's slogged so that others could saunter. And as a side note, I had to look up the definition of saunter, and it means a leisurely stroll, which sounds very pleasant. Review dude Josh also commented and said, who wants to hear me and Corey debate on whether or not Transformers would ruin the Fast and the Furious series? There's no debate, Josh. Just get off it. On one hand, you have the greatest film franchise of all time, Fast and Furious, and on the other hand, you have Michael Bay's Transformers. An unholy curse from the beast we call the Desolate One, the first of the fallen, the spoiler of virgins, the master of abortions. Let me help you out of your chair, Grandma!
Grandma, what was it like to be on the holiday side? Late that night, I awoke from my sleep, hearing unknown voices laughing inside!
Okay. All right. Thank you so much to everyone that took the time to listen to the debate, and especially to those who took the time to send something in. I had such an amazing time hosting and producing this episode. It's one of the favorite things I have done on this podcast. It's up there with Three Ninjas reboot pitches easily. But here's my next request for you, the audience. Do you want to hear Steve and Pappy do another film-related debate? If so, what would you like to hear? Let me know in the YouTube comments of this video. If we get something good, I'm sure we can put it together. You heard them both. You know what they're about. Let's do the Great Movie Debate Part 2. Help me out, guys. And that's going to wrap up this shorter episode. At the time of this episode's release, we do have a new upload on YouTube that I would love you guys to check out. It's a Three Ninjas Kickback highlight video, which was made by my pal, Review Dude Josh. I would love it if you would check that out. Share it with your friends who love Three Ninjas. I'm sure you got a ton. Give it a thumbs up on YouTube. Leave us a comment. All the stuff. You know what to do. I'm sorry there weren't more full podcast episodes this month, but the good news is there's going to be many episodes coming out for the Halloween season, and I think you all are going to like those very much. We have a lot of things planned. It's going to be packed. And with that, I say thank you for listening. We love you, and play me out, Jackson.